Hi, and welcome to another episode of Property Particulars podcast, where today my guest is Kurt Lee. Hi, Kurt.
Hi, Doug.
So, Kurt you are not from my residential property team.
No.
So, tell me where you are in connection to us and LA and your journey in LA.
Right, okay. So I've been with LA for 10 years, and I lead the private client department in Lester Aldridge. I split my time between Bournemouth and London, and as well as being a solicitor, I'm also a chartered tax advisor as well. So all the tax techie stuff comes to me.
Excellent. And so just so to get the full picture of it, so the private client team that has like a few different pockets of areas and stuff. It's not just private client on its own.
No, so we're part of the private wealth group in Lester Aldridge. So we have your team, residential property, both in London and Bournemouth. We've got the family team in there as well. We've also got an international private client team, as well as the team that I lead, the sort of what I would call the domestic private client side.
Yeah, okay, cool. And we work so closely with you and your team, so we kind of, I think, almost like daily contact sometimes on our transactions with you, which is so good because we need the help all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything to do with the individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you deal with, that I deal with. It's people buying and selling their homes, the tax implications of doing that. It's about sort of, family matters and I mean, it's just, as a team, I think, we have a lot of communication going on between us.
Yeah, I think so. And and it's not always one way. So you'll come to me with clients that you have started with you and then need to come over to Resi Prop for help, and equally the other way around.
That's it. So a lot of the estates that we deal with that are in, probates and administration of estates, invariably there's property in there that needs to be dealt with properly. So we send that to you guys to deal with. And yeah, I mean, it's, declarations of trust coming back to our team as well.
Yes.
I mean, there's lots to cover there.
Yeah, there's a lot to go. So I suppose with my team and residential property and the amount of communication that you and I have directly is normally always a stamp duty query, and you are our in-house expert, I would say. And so I quite often, like on the start of each transaction, it is one of the most common questions where I'll have buyers coming to me and they'll be asking me straight away, how much stamp duty do I need to pay? What do I need to pay? And obviously we give a kind of an overview of all the different potentials. But if there's anything out of the ordinary, I come straight to you. And the surcharge is one of the biggest things that I get asked about all the time.
Yeah, the SDLT in particular is probably one of the more complicated aspects of tax. And an increasing number of inquiries coming from your team, just with people's circumstances are all completely different, and so when they get in touch with you and they've got a property transaction that they want to start, SDLT can be a really important part of that. And SDLT, it's it's a dead cost. It's a really big number that you have to pay, and you get nothing in return for it. And so, getting that right really does matter. And the surcharge rates of SDLT, when and if they apply, that can add up to a big number.
Yeah, especially, I mean, in both our areas down on the south coast and here, we're dealing with big price of properties.
Really big.
On both, it's not just London Central. South coast properties that we've dealt with in our team are crazy, into millions and millions.
They are, and when you're talking about those high value properties, the SDLT bill runs into hundreds of thousands of pounds potentially as well, and the stamp duty surcharge rates are a big part of that for a lot of your clients in particular. So the surcharge rates, they apply where someone already owns an interest in a residential property anywhere in the world. If that's what they're doing, and they're buying another property here in England, then potentially they've got surcharge rates to pay on that. And that is an extra 3% on top of the ordinary rates of tax through all of the different bands and thresholds that there are.
Yeah, I think that the bit that you just said there about anywhere in the world, that's the bit that I get asked about a lot as well.
Yeah, it really catches people out. If someone owns a 5% interest in a property in Spain, then they're caught by it, potentially. Now, there are some exemptions to that. You know, if somebody is selling their main home, or they have done within the last 3 years, and now they're buying a new main home within that period of time or at the same time, then that's absolutely fine. They don't have to pay the surcharge rates. If you are buying a new main home but you haven't yet sold your current main home, then you will have to pay those surcharge rates of tax initially. But provided you then sell your old main home within a 3-year period, you can go back and you can reclaim that surcharge element of tax.
Yeah, and we've done that a few times for clients, but equally on when you get the rebate within the 3 years, it's actually quite simple for clients to do themselves, isn't it, that process?
It is. They can do that, or otherwise your team can deal with it. And I think, you know, because your team deals with it day in, day out, and you've got the forms and the amendment of the return, it's just, you know, it's quite efficient for your team to do it, and it saves the client any hassle of dealing with the inland revenue.
Yeah, exactly, which none of us want to do at any time. And so that kind of leads on a bit of what you're talking about there, about people paying the surcharge, because then the next question I get most often, because I have our team has a huge amount of international clients.
Yeah.
And so some of them are families buying in the UK. Probably the most common is buying a pad here in the UK, maybe for children coming to uni. We do get that a lot.
Yeah.
But then we have another kind of rate or penalty for the non-res?
Yeah, absolutely. So as well as the surcharge rates, you've also got a non-resident rate as well. And if you fall into that category, it's another 2% on top of potentially the 3% on top of the ordinary rates of SDLT. And then that's when the numbers do really start to mount up. So with the non-resident surcharge, it's an extra 2%. If you own a property anywhere else in the world, then you'll be paying the 3% surcharge as well. Now, the non-res surcharge, there's a lot of rules around that. But basically, if you are not resident in the UK, then you have to pay the charge. And you're not resident. If you spend less than ordinarily 183 days in the UK, before the transaction, then you're going to be liable to pay it. But then there are all sorts of rules around that. So if you have to pay that non-resident surcharge initially, but then you do acquire a UK residence within 1 year before or 1 year after the transaction, and you have to be in the UK for 183 days, then again you can potentially go back and reclaim that non-resident element.
Yeah. And I suppose as a team, as a private wealth group team, we're quite lucky in this regard to have this expertise with you, because otherwise if we didn't, our clients would be going elsewhere to maybe get accountancy advice, which might not be as good. So we're quite lucky in the fact that I can, and sometimes I'm just asking you for a bit of a favour to help me out on one, for an off-the-cuff comment for that particular client before then making an introduction to you. And then quite often, though, it leads from a stamp duty to lots of other tax issues and help that you can give to our clients.
It does. So it can lead into lots of other things. There's capital gains tax aspects that we might get involved with if they're selling their current property somewhere. But there's also issues around mixed use, for example, for stamp duty land tax purposes. And I think you and I recently, or last year, dealt with a really high value property where we were able to get mixed use on it, and that's really great because then you get non-residential rates of SDLT. But the advice on that needs to be really quite clear and accurate and detailed, and that's the sort of expertise and professionalism that I and we at LA can bring to it.
Yeah, and the bit that sometimes is great for us is that if we're buying for a client and they've got mortgage lending, then we have to have the backup of expert advice. So either from you or if a client did have an accountant, because we've got a duty to our lender. So we're just in such a great position to offer that to our clients who are buying such high value properties.
Yeah, it's reassurance for the client, but also, as you say, for the lender as well. You have to make full disclosure of everything to the lender And if there's a tax relief, so just very recently we had MDR, that's now been sort of abolished from the 1st of June. But in those sorts of cases, you have to be able to provide that sort of clear and accurate advice.
Yeah, definitely. I'm quite glad in a way that maybe MDR is going. We used to get a lot of questions about it, but yeah, that rule has changed for us. Well, thank you for all that advice. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch a little bit and ask a bit more fun, personal stuff. So, our podcast is called Property Particulars.
Yes.
Presume you have, but have you
Yes.
bought and sold property before? Have you done it recently? Have you been a good client?
Yeah, my wife and I, we have been, we bought our very first property in 1998, and we've been sort of, I like to stay where I am. My wife likes to move just
Okay.
every few years. So we've moved a few times.
Oh, wow, okay.
The last time we moved was in November of 2018, a few years ago, but it was horrendous. It was just awful, awful experience. They do say that divorce and moving house are the two most stressful things, don't they?
That's it.
And this was really one of them. And it was sort of, it's always a problem caused by the other side, isn't it? But it really was in this particular case. The vendor on that side was just really quite difficult. And in the end, we had a buyer for our place, and there was a very short chain on that. But I did that one thing that my lawyer, who was another conveyancer here in Lester Aldridge, I did that one thing that a lawyer never tells you to do. Never exchange to sell before you've also exchanged to buy.
Yeah.
But I was under such pressure that I just took a gamble. And I gave authority to exchange to sell our home. And then the following day, Sarah, who was dealing with the property for me, she came down and said, the place that you want to buy, they've pulled out.
Okay.
I'm just...
We could use this as a case study. I wasn't aware of all this. This
Oh,
is amazing.
yeah. I mean, it was awful. It was awful, and we managed to sort of tease them back into the deal, but they absolutely would not complete when we wanted them to or needed them to when we had sold our house, and so in the end, we had to just pack up all of our stuff and put it into storage. And my wife and I and our son, at the time, we moved into a furnished holiday let for 3.5 weeks while we were waiting for the transaction to complete. But the stress of that, I cannot tell you, it was the most awful experience I think I've ever been through.
Do you know what? I get stressed sometimes on behalf of my clients dealing with things. That does sound tricky and stressful. Do you know what, though? Since that time, and I think it's definitely since the lockdown and COVID, there are more and more chains that we deal with where people want to be a more attractive buyer, and so people do now break the chain, sell with the view to kind of move into friends or temporary. And I never really, like the dates you're talking about, would never have dealt with that before, but more and more now it's coming through.
Having as awful as the experience was at that time, I would do it again, actually, for exactly that reason now. I think, there are, especially down on the south coast, there are lots of furnished holiday lets. And if you're selling it out of season, as we were, you've got a lot of choice there. To pick up this was a 3-bedroom furnished holiday let for a few weeks at a time. And it was absolutely fantastic. And I did it again, everything into storage, furnished holiday let for a few weeks, break the chain, as you say, because if you can do that, and you're planned for it, you're prepared for that.
Yes.
Then I think that will take a lot of stress out.
You weren't planned completely that time, but I get what you say. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. One last question for you.
Go on.
So this is what I'm asking a lot of people. What would be, you might already be in it. What is your dream house to own? Dream location? Money is no object.
If money was no object, I would have a converted warehouse in a US loft-style apartment. Ooh. And on the ground floor, it would just be a garage for the cars and the motorbikes and the scooters.
I love it.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll come visit. Kurt, thank you so much for joining us today. Please join us again some other time for another episode of Property Particulars, or please check out our Instagram at Lester Aldridge Property.